Today, we're digging into a military doctrine that absolutely changed the game. It's a concept that led to one of the most stunning victories in modern history. And then, it was officially banned. But here's the twist. It never really went away. So what is this ghost doctrine, and why does it still matter so much? Let's get into it.
The idea that whoever controls the sky wins the war, that's not exactly new. The famous German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel knew it way back when. He understood that owning the air was the key to victory on the ground. But for a long time, that was mostly just theory. That is, until 1991.
When the U.S.-led coalition kicked off its air war against Iraq, it was like something out of a science fiction movie. It was incredibly fast, unbelievably precise, and just devastatingly effective. So what was going on? What was the secret sauce? What was the radical new thinking that made it all work? To get that answer, we've got to rewind a little, back to the crisis that started it all. Because this wasn't just another conflict. The speed of it, the sheer scale of the global response, it all set the stage for a completely new kind of war.
And man, did things move fast. In August of 1990, Saddam Hussein's army just rolls over Kuwait in a matter of hours. The world freaks out, and the UN immediately demands a withdrawal. When that deadline came and went in January 91, one of the biggest military coalitions ever seen was sitting there, ready to go.
And the result? Honestly, it was just stunning. After 43 days of non-stop airstrikes, the ground invasion started, and a battle that experts thought would be a long, bloody mess was over in 100 hours. The Iraqi army, which was one of the biggest in the world, just collapsed. It blew people's minds and brings us right back to that main question: how? The answer is in a huge shift in military thinking. The coalition wasn't just hitting harder, they were fighting smarter. They had a completely different end goal in mind.
So, for basically all of history, war was about attrition. A slugfest, just smashing the enemy's army into pieces until there's nothing left. But this new approach? Totally different. The goal wasn't to destroy the Iraqi army. The goal was to paralyze the entire Iraqi state so that it was literally incapable of fighting. The focus wasn't just on blowing stuff up. It was on creating very specific planned effects.
And this new way of thinking was baked into an air campaign plan drawn up at the Pentagon by a team led by a guy named Colonel John Warden. And he called it Instant Thunder. And yeah, that name was deliberate. It was a direct shot at Rolling Thunder, the slow, grinding, and ultimately failed air campaign from the Vietnam War. This was designed to be the absolute opposite of that.
So what do you call this revolutionary new idea? Well, it has a simple, kind of corporate-sounding name, but trust me, its impact is huge. It's called effects-based operations, or EBO for short.
Okay, the official definition's a little dry, I know, but the key idea here is all about working backward. Instead of planners asking, okay, what targets can we destroy, they started asking, what's the effect we want to create, and what's the smartest, most efficient way to get there? It's a total flip from focusing on the means to focusing on the end result.
Right, so here's the crucial part. EBO doesn't see an enemy as a collection of tanks and soldiers. It sees them as an interconnected system, kind of like a living body. The whole goal is to figure out the most important nodes in that system, what military geeks call centers of gravity, the real sources of an enemy's power, and hit them to cause a total cascading collapse. It's less like a boxing match and more like strategic brain surgery. And this shows you exactly how the planners saw Iraq. They pictured it as 5 concentric rings. Right there in the center, the bullseye, the most important part was leadership. Then moving out from there, you had key production, stuff like electricity and oil, then infrastructure, then the population, and finally, way out on the edge, the actual army. Now, the old way was to fight your way from the outside in. EBO's plan? Strike the center first. Okay, so that's the theory. Sounds pretty smart, right? But how did it actually play out in the real world during the war? Let's take a look at how this thinking was actually used. So here's the old playbook, which the planners called series warfare. And you can see why. It's just one step after another. You have to punch through the outer air defenses, then the inner air defenses, then their airfields. It's slow, it's costly, and you're just trying to get to the targets that really matter, like the command bunkers in the capital. But EBO, with the help of a whole bunch of new tech, allowed for parallel warfare. We're not just talking about stealth jets like the F-117. We're talking about precision-guided bombs that could hit a specific window from thousands of feet up, and command systems that let you coordinate it all. So instead of a slow sequence, you get everything happening at once. On the very first night of the war, the enemy is getting hit everywhere, creating absolute shock and paralysis.
And the effect was unreal. In just the first few days of the air campaign, strikes took out 57% of Iraq's command and control facilities. Think about that. The point wasn't to destroy every building. The point was to create a specific effect, to sever the brain from the body.
After the war, we learned that their communications were so wrecked that for an order to get from Baghdad to the front lines, it had to be driven by a messenger, a trip that took 48 hours. The army was literally left blind and leaderless in the desert. They weren't destroyed, but they were paralyzed. And that's why the 100-hour ground war happened. The war was essentially won before the first tank rolled across the border.
Now, after a success story like that, you'd think effects-based operations would be the foundation for all military planning forever, right? Well, this is where the story takes a really strange turn.
So in 2008, this memo drops, and it's a bombshell. It's from General James Mattis, and he basically says the whole idea of effects-based operations is wrong. He argued that it tries to turn war, which is chaotic and human and messy, into some kind of predictable engineering problem. It creates this dangerous illusion that you can perfectly map out what's going to happen.
And just like that, it was over. The official doctrine was dead. The command in charge of new warfighting ideas literally ordered everyone to stop using the term EBO. It was wiped from the official language.
But did the idea really die, or did it just kind of go into hiding?
Well, here's a funny thing. If you actually look at the U.S. military's current Joint Planning Guide, you'll find that the supposedly banned concept of creating specific effects is mentioned 124 times.
And that's really the answer to the whole mystery. The name EBO became toxic. It promised a level of scientific certainty you just can't have in war. But the core logic, thinking about the results you want first, targeting an enemy like a system, trying to paralyze instead of just annihilate, that thinking was just too powerful to let go of. So they banned the name, but they kept the brain.
And that leaves us with one last really big question. This way of thinking, born in the skies over Iraq, is still shaping military operations all over the world, even if no one calls it by its old name. So you have to wonder, how do you even deal with a doctrine you can't see? One that quietly continues to define how modern wars are fought.